Good morning, everybody. We're going to get this thing started, so if we can finish up the deals, any deal that occurred during this time, Colliers takes 10% of, so just so you know that, it's pretty simple. Can you all hear me back there in the back? Can you hear me? Good. All right. Fantastic. Well, I just want to take a minute here to give you a good morning and welcome to the 20th anniversary of our West Michigan Economic and Commercial Real Estate Forecast. I'm Duke. I'm the CEO of Colliers West Michigan, and it's my pleasure on behalf of our entire team to welcome you here today. And we are grateful and thankful and appreciate so much you being here to celebrate this milestone with us. Whether this is your first or your 20th time in attendance, we really are honored and privileged to have you here. It means a lot to us that you could come out to this. When we decided to do this forecast event 20 years ago, it's because we had seen it taking place in other markets, larger markets, and we wanted to bring it to West Michigan, and it's something we wanted to try. We wanted it to be research-based, and we wanted it to be a credible consideration of the economic and the commercial real estate conditions in West Michigan. There were other events at the time in the area that discussed economics, but there were none that were specifically focused on commercial real estate. We're super fortunate to have a great university in our backyard, and we have been pleased and blessed to be able to partner with the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University right from the beginning, which allowed us to provide a really robust evaluation of the overall market. I believe we had about 35 people at the very first event. How many of you think you were maybe at the first event? How many of you were there? So there were a few of you there. That was 20 years ago. But from that event, we were encouraged to continue to expand and increase and change the event over the years. And I'm just thankful to all of you for allowing us to partner with you on this event. Before we start the show, I just want to thank the Colliers team members who have put so much work over the last months and over the last year towards the creation and implementation of this fantastic event. These guys snuck out, but I wanted to thank them. So I appreciate you giving them a round of applause, but I want to thank the talent of good. The group is Asamu Johnson and the Associates of the Blues. A few years ago, we really needed them with the blues, but today we sing a different kind of blues. It's a good blues. But one of the guys in here, Adam McMillan, is a Colliers multi-talented person who's in the group. He performs backup vocals. He also does the keyboard. Adam, are you sneaking around here somewhere? Stick your head up if you are. Well, anyhow, thanks again. They're awesome, and we appreciate them being here this morning. We've partnered, as I said, with the Seidman College of Business for 20 years, and it's been a great partnership. Their active support, participation, and leadership has been essential for us to be able to put this event on over the years. And at this time, you're going to see a message from Dean Lawson of the Seidman College of Business.
Good morning. I'm Diana Lawson. I'm the Dean of the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. I'd like to welcome you to the 20th anniversary of the West Michigan Economic and Commercial Real Estate Forecast event here at DeVos Place. Grand Valley State University and Colliers International West Michigan have been partners in this event since the beginning. As you look around the room, you can see by the people here that this event does bring value to the community. As many of you know, because many of you are partners with us, Grand Valley State University is committed to helping in the economic growth of the West Michigan region and beyond through our expertise. A very strong component of our curriculum is the experiential learning we provide for our students. The faculty and staff work diligently to create new opportunities, maintain existing opportunities, so our students will have hands-on learning as they are preparing for the beginning of their careers. The only way we can do this is with very strong partnerships with the business communities. Many of the businesses in the audience today are our partners, and we value those partnerships. We understand from talking to many of you as well as other businesses that talent is the top issue in the region for continued economic sustainability. We take that challenge seriously and work with our students so they are prepared and ready to fill the needs you have as you build your businesses. We take our obligation seriously to help develop those minds in new ways and to better prepare our students for the challenges you will face in the future. Our goal is to help all learners realize their ambition, build their skills, and contribute to the community. As most of you know, in July, we welcomed a new president to Grand Valley State University. Dr. Philomena Mantella is our 5th president who has set a goal for us to be a breakout university. We will do this by our entrepreneurial spirit, being agile, and fearlessly growing and changing to meet new demands. Partnerships like this one is a contributing factor to meeting this goal. We've brought our Seidman Business Review and we'll distribute it after the program. It provides additional information around these opportunities for our graduates. Thank you for joining us this morning and enjoy the program.
Good morning. My name is John Potvin, and I'm the Managing Director of Colliers International, West Michigan. I've held this position for 3.5 years now, and I couldn't be more pleased with the role that I play in this company, as well as all the people that I get to work with every day, and especially being a part of this event. As Duke mentioned, this is the 20th year of this event, and a number of you have been here for almost all 20 years, some for all 20, some in between there. I have been here for 5 years. This is my 5th event. Every single one I know has been top-notch. 4 of them I have been invited to. Thankfully, Colliers invited me to each one since I've been employed with them. Judging by the size of the crowd today, I'm thinking there may be a few others that might have snuck in. I've done that before. It's okay if you do it one time. We truly thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to be here today. We know you're all busy. On behalf of Colliers, Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State, we thank them for their participation and support of this event over the past 20 years. Of course, this couldn't be possible without the support of all of our sponsors. Our top 2 sponsors in the Platinum category this year are First National Bank of Michigan and Sun Title. We thank you for your support and all of the partnerships we've developed over the years. I also want to recognize a few other top sponsors: United Bank, Chicago Title, Miller Johnson, Sidecar, and Custer Steelcase. And we especially thank Custer for the wonderful furniture that's on stage here today. In addition, I want to thank all the bronze sponsors and supporter sponsors for helping make this possible. Just a key reminder, our parking sponsor is West Michigan Community Bank. You will have received, or you should have received, a parking validation ticket when you registered today. If you didn't, please see us at the desk when you leave. And lastly, as Duke mentioned, this event wouldn't be possible without all of the tireless efforts of our entire team at Colliers putting this event on. It takes nearly a year to plan for this, and it takes so much time and effort, and I'm so thankful for everybody that we work with that puts their heart and soul into this event. This year, for the first time, we partnered with a third-party group called Propel Business Group. And this is owned and operated by Abby Leach, and she did a great job in partnering along with our Colliers team to put on such a great event. So I want to thank her and all of the people at Colliers for all their great work this year. We hope this event is beneficial for you and will help you gain a better understanding of the commercial, real estate, and economic forecast for this upcoming year. At this time, please turn your attention to the 2 screens for 2 brief videos from our Platinum sponsors, First National Bank of Michigan and Sun Title.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Grundig, Executive Vice President with First National Bank of Michigan.
And I'm Dan Bitzer, CEO.
We are delighted to be a partner in the 2020 Economic and Commercial Real Estate Forecast event.
First National Bank of Michigan is a full-service community bank. We are privately held, and decisions for our customers are made by our employees locally that work and live in West Michigan. We offer a wide range of services, including commercial banking, treasury, and private banking. We're proud to play an important role in helping our customers achieve their financial goals and contribute to continued economic growth in West Michigan.
We have a long history of partnering with Colliers International, West Michigan. Our team of experienced bankers have been instrumental in assisting customers in the community. We're pleased that our sponsorship, along with your attendance at the event, will support research at Van Andel Institute. Thank you for attending this year's Forecast event.
Together, we are first.
Hi, I'm Lawrence Dutler, one of the owners of Sun Title, and we're excited to be participating in the 20th anniversary of the Forecast event. We've spent the last 15 years building one of the largest commercial teams in West Michigan, with 4 on-staff attorneys, commercial examiners, commercial escrow, with an entire team of almost 100 people. We work on the most complex transactions, everything from land leases to large construction development projects, sales, refinancings. We always appreciate the partners we have both on the lending side and the brokerage side who bring us these fun transactions that we can work on together. We want to thank Colliers and Grand Valley State University for putting on a spectacular Forecast event every year. It's a huge investment that you make into our community so that we can look towards 2020 and beyond to be the best that we can be. Enjoy the event.
Thank you again, First National Bank and Sun Title. Please give them a round of applause for taking care of. Thank you. Now join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Isley. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Wisconsin. He's the Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs at the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. He's worked with GVSU for 25 years. He's been an integral part of our Forecast event. He shares his expertise on the economy, his projections for the future, not only just for Grand Rapids, but West Michigan and beyond. His presentations are always one of the most anticipated portions of the event and one of the ones people comment on the most. We are so grateful again to have Dr. Paul Isley. Please.
Thanks, Duke. All right, so we have to look and see what the future is bringing us. So we'll be looking at what the tides look like as we go through 2019, as we finish 2019 and go into 2020. So last year when we were here, I want to remind you some of the things we talked about. We talked about the fact that during the second half of 2019, we'd start to see some slowdowns in parts of the economy, that the first half of the year would be pretty good, that there'd be lots of wage growth, that workers would be happy, that tightness in the labor market would bring about the possibility of some unrest in labor as we started to have contracts renewed. And we talked about the fact that job growth overall in the economy would be slower than it was in 2018. So that's where we were at. Hopefully that feels about right to you. Do we get a thumbs up, maybe? Okay, some? All right. So what are we looking at this year? The economic wave that we have been seeing has crested, but the trough that we're looking at that follows is not steep. So as we do that, I'm going to be looking at 3 things for you as we go through the forecast for this year. First thing we're going to look at is what's actually slowed down during 2019. A lot of you are in businesses that haven't yet, and therefore you need to see what the businesses are that are slowing down. All right? We're then going to talk about where there's possibilities for the next year and how the executives across West Michigan see us moving forward in 2020. And then we're going to be giving you a few things to look at as you finish out the year. All right? So, first question, did the economic wave crest in 2019? All right. So, I want to show you that this slowdown that we're seeing across West Michigan is actually rooted in manufacturing. All right? So, those of you who aren't in manufacturing likely aren't feeling anything at this point in time. In fact, you probably say, this was one of my best years yet. So as we look at this, this is the year-over-year change in the Institute of Supply Chain Management West Michigan Index. This is done by Grand Valley State University using Brian Long and Dan Pellethy. And you can see when I was talking to you last year, we started to turn and slow down. And actually, by the time we reached the end of the year, that index turned negative, showing that industry was contracting. All right? So that's a questionnaire. What does the actual numbers on the ground look like? Here we can see that the hours worked, if we look at the total number of hours worked in manufacturing and compare it now to a year before, you can see, looking at that far right line, we're down nearly 5% year over year in hours worked in manufacturing in Michigan, and almost 0.6%, a little more than 0.5% down nationwide. You can see that turned a couple of months after orders turned. So this isn't a bunch of automation causing this to happen. We saw a drop in orders, then we saw a drop in hours worked. All right? And then you can see that it started in automotive, so that happened here in the Midwest first, and then it started to bleed to the entire economy as we got to the second half of the year. All right? So what we're seeing right now is a slowdown in manufacturing, and particularly here across the Midwest, the slowdown is pronounced enough to actually call it a recession in that sector. All right? Why can we say that? Because in West Michigan, and in fact across the Midwest, that drop in hours in manufacturing has now bled across the economy, and we're seeing a drop in total hours in the Midwest. So we're down about about 1.5%. All right? But it hasn't done so in the United States. So we're still seeing overall growth in the United States. We're still seeing movement forward. We've stopped seeing it here in West Michigan. As a final piece to look at, you can see that the labor crunch really hit its maximum about mid-year. So this is the change in wages, hourly wages, year over year. And you can see by mid-year, here in West Michigan, we had 8% year over year growth. That's a big number. You've probably been watching the business literature, and they've been saying, oh, there's no wage growth. There's nothing here that says that there's constraint in workers. We had tight enough constraints in workers, and our wages were far enough below the national and wages that we saw really fast wage growth in Michigan, in West Michigan. About double what we saw in the rest of the United States, and about double what we saw in Michigan as a whole. But after we started to see that drop in hours worked, we can see that hourly wage start to fall, the growth in it start to fall as we reach the second half of the year. And in fact, many of your industries have benefited by the fact that the competition for workers from manufacturing has eased off a little bit, making it a little easier to find a plumber or a welder or somebody to help you in your profession. Okay, so as we go forward to 2020, will we see a turn? Now remember, in Grand Valley, we do this by talking to businesses. We send surveys to businesses. I get about 250 return surveys from the 1,200 major businesses across West Michigan every year. That's a very high response rate in survey land. I do focus groups with businesses, and I spend lots of times at meetings like this talking with all of you to get an idea where things are at. All right? As we do that, the surveys have told us that the business leaders expect the sales will weaken this year. Particularly, they're not going negative, but that group that thought that they were going to have really fast growth really took a step back and are talking about slow, sustainable growth. All right? And because of that, they need fewer workers. We now have 85% of the firms saying that they are going to increase their workforce by less than 1%. All right? A large percentage of that are at zero, and we now have 5% saying that they're going to reduce the number of workers that they have. That's a big change from what we were seeing last year, and a really big change from what we saw 2 years ago. All right? In fact, this year, not only are they expecting slower employment growth, they're expecting employment growth below what they expected last year and below what they actually did last year. So their expectations were better than what actually happened. All right? And this has resulted in confidence starting to ebb. That's still really high confidence, all right? But you can see that it's crested and it's started to come down a little bit. What we're seeing is businesses starting to get just a little worried. This isn't running for the exits. This isn't being scared. This is a slow, orderly slowdown in business. All right? That's predictable and can be planned for. And just to remind you, we'll take you back to your Finance 101 class. If you remember, the reason why your stock market is supposed to double in value every 10 years is because essentially corporate profits grow at about 7 to 10% every year. In fact, the average since 1960 has been a 10-year increase in corporate profits of 109%. All right? What you can see is if you look down on the very lower part on the right-hand side, is corporate profits dropped as we went into 15, 16. Not dropped, the growth rate dropped. Let me be precise. The growth rate really slowed down and slowed down well below that 10-year average rate of 100%. All right? And then in the last few years, you see that little pop-up. That came about for two reasons. Number one, we had a big drop in the price of gasoline. Oil went from $100 a barrel to $40 a barrel about that time frame. The second thing that we had was a change in corporate tax rates. Those two things propelled those profits up. And now you can see right at the very end, we now have 2 quarters where that's starting to fall again, where that growth rate is starting to fall off again. There's still corporate profits. We're still moving forward. But we're moving slower forward than the average of the last 50 years. All right? That is really indicative of someone's accounting department coming in and saying, our profits are slowing down, you need to cut costs. So what we're watching right now is those quarterly reports coming out of businesses to see whether we see that is the order of the day or not. All right? So at this point, it's not problematic, but it's a symptom that we're at the end of this expansion. Okay? Ooh, come on. There we go. So are we building a new wave? There's a couple things that you need to know about here. Number one, the Federal Reserve stepped in, and they stepped in really, really strong this year. All right? So this is the securities held by the Federal Reserve. You can think higher holdings mean lower interest rates. All right? And you can see that they had a really high reserve coming out of the Great Recession, and it really hadn't come down until we got to the end of 17-18 when they started to unwind their position. In the last 6 months, that $330 billion that they have sold in securities, they've bought $250 billion of them back. That adds money to the economy, that speeds the economy up, that lowers interest rates. They've come in a big way, and that's really supported businesses that are interest rate sensitive. We also have finally starting to get some clarity on exports. So traditionally, exports are a shining light for West Michigan. Here across West Michigan, we have about $5 billion in exports every year. We send about $5 billion of the stuff we make to other countries. All right? As the trade tension started to elevate, that growth shriveled down to almost nothing. And there was fear in the companies that were doing those things. This year, for the first time since that occurred, we're starting to see a little more optimism that the agreements that look like they're being made and the discussions have become less heated. And so people are a little bit more optimistic about being able to send out exports. But here's our problem. We don't have enough workers to take advantage of the growth as it starts to come into place. So if we look across the Grand Rapids MSA, the two primary counties, of course, are Ottawa and Kent County for this. Our increase in our labor force this last year was 0.3 percentage points. That means there's not enough new workers to grow. Let's put it another way. Every year right now, we have 2,000 more workers moving into the 65 to 70-year-old age set and moving into the retirement group. And we have 1,000 fewer workers coming into the 15 and 19-year-old age group that brings in your entry-level workers. We have fewer workers coming into the bucket, more workers coming out of the bucket. We have to convince people to come here, or we have to convince people who have never worked that they should work. We also have a lot of residential strength still across West Michigan. So as we look at the West Michigan price index for housing, you can see that it has remained strong and remained positive. And in Grand Rapids, it has now outpaced the gains of the rest of Kent County since 2005. So we've seen substantial growth in downtown. Unfortunately, what this has done is it's caused that price growth. Remember, those hourly wages were going up 8%. They're working fewer hours, so they're getting less than that 8%. And these prices are up 20%. Housing prices are starting to become unsustainable for the working class as we look at it right now. So, what have we done? We've looked at where the slowdowns are happening. The slowdowns are happening around things that are associated with manufacturing. It attached itself to automotive first and has bled to more manufacturing as the year went along. All right? Including transportation. We've looked at the fact that here in West Michigan, business leaders expect us to slow down a little bit more next year compared to this year, even though next year will look, the year 2020 will look an awful lot like 19, it'll be a smidge slower. And we have a lot of things that are buffeting the economy right now. So we have growth being put into from the Federal Reserve and from improved trade, but we have a headwind with the amount of talent that we have. So I'm going to do one last cautionary tale before I get out of this. Recessions have changed, slowdowns have changed compared to what they have in the past. So in the old days, they'd go down, and within 2 years, everybody got their job back, and it happened very quickly. Since that time, they look like smiley faces. That's sort of bad because they aren't smiley. They look like smiley faces, and they go out a much longer distance. They go out a much longer distance because when people lose their jobs, at the end, they don't get them back. So in 1991, we had Windows and Word and Excel added to all of our businesses. The typing pool disappeared. Middle managers disappeared. You didn't need them. The computer did it. All right? In 2001, we had all put in new IT equipment. IT workers lost their jobs. In 2008, 2009, finance workers and construction workers lost their job. What we're looking at for this coming slowdown are transactional workers, workers who move a transaction from point A to point B. All right? That's the group that we're looking at right now. And what's unique about this is if you look at the last 3 recessions, they have affected traditional male jobs. As we look at these transactional jobs, there are more women in these jobs than there are men. So it's going to change the dynamic of what a recession looks like if that's what we see. So if you're in a transactional time, it's time to be moving up the value chain to prepare for that slowdown as it grows wider. All right, so what are we looking at? We're already in a limited recession in some of our sectors, primarily manufacturing. If you're not in manufacturing, there's a good chance you're not even feeling it, or you still feel like this was one of the best years that you've had yet. All right, 2020 will continue that slowdown that we started in 2019, but it's going to be slow and orderly, not crazy and out of control like we had last time. And there are too few workers in West Michigan to support our work growing forward if we want to grow. So as we look at things here for the coming year, it looks really good for interest rate sensitive businesses and looks relatively weak yet, at least for the first part of the year, for those who are making goods for other workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's great news for brokers, transactional workers. If anybody's hiring, no. Thanks, Paul. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I think we all see it, we feel it, we understand it, but getting the research is always the most important thing, and that's why we greatly appreciate working with Seidman College and Dr. Isley to put this together every year. Incredible information. So as we celebrate the 20th anniversary, one of the things we desired to do this year was highlight a local entity or nonprofit that's greatly benefiting our region, something different. We haven't done this before. We decided this year to recognize and provide a little more exposure on the Van Andel Institute. If a visitor to our community asked you what goes on inside the Van Andel Arena, I suspect everybody in this room can tell them about the Griffins games, the incredible concerts, the other unique shows that take place inside those walls. But if that same visitor were to ask you what goes on inside the walls of the Van Andel Institute, which I think we all recognize up on the hill, I trust most of us wouldn't be able to provide much clarity at all about what they do or the impact they make on West Michigan. The impact from the arena was evident and obvious immediately. We saw that whole area change. The Institute's been here 20 years. What's the impact? Our goal today is to change that impression and to provide you with a glimpse of what occurs there and display the incredible impact that it is having locally, regionally, and actually globally. As many of you may be aware, there are proceeds coming from this event that will benefit the VAI and support the outstanding work they are doing each day, and in recognition of the tremendous impact that they are having on the community and on us as members of this community. VAI has some of the best and brightest researchers in the world, and they're working to find cures for Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson, and other insidious diseases. These international researchers are right here in Grand Rapids, and they are dedicating their lives to the discovery of cures for these devastating conditions. I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Patrick Brunden from the Van Andel Institute. He's the Associate Director of Research and Director for the Center of Neurodegenerative Science. He investigates molecular mechanisms in Parkinson's. His goals are to develop new therapies aimed at slowing or stopping disease progression or actually repairing the damage. He's one of the top-cited researchers in the field of neurodegenerative disease. He leads international efforts to repurpose existing drugs to treat Parkinson's. The Van Andel Institute's on the cutting edge of research, and they're making substantial strides because of individuals like Dr. Patrick Brunden. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Patrick Brunden.
So thank you for the invitation to come here. I must admit, I feel a little bit like a fish out of water. So I come from Sweden. We've lived here in Grand Rapids for 8 years. And when I got the invite to speak here, I thought you knew something about us. My parents-in-law from Sweden come here every year a couple of times, and we actually bought a small condo in East Grand Rapids for them this fall. We remodeled the condo, and on Christmas Eve, we wrapped the door in Christmas wrapping, and it was a bit of a surprise to them. They knew there was something going on, but they didn't quite know what was going on. And I just texted the real estate agent, Steve Morse, good friend and neighbor of ours, saying, look, Because we bought that condo and remodeled it, I'm now giving a speech here at this Grand Rapids development. Maybe that wasn't the reason I'm invited here. So, Van Andel Institute, how has that driven or promoted innovation in this community? And how has that attracted so many people from so many countries? In the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to describe to you who works at the Institute, where we come from, how many we are, what sort of diseases we're addressing, and I'll give you one example in greater detail of the sort of progress that's being made by looking at the past, the present, and the future of Parkinson's disease. That's my specialty. Full disclosure, my dad had Parkinson's disease. When I was 13 years old, I decided this is something I wanted to work with, so I haven't really done much else in my life. Jay and Betty Van Andel were also afflicted by a neurodegenerative disease. They had Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Their children had been affected by cancer. So one day, Jay and his family said, we want to invest in research. The story goes that once they'd recruited a panel of experts, several Nobel Prize winners in medicine, they were told that they should invest in a research institute either in the Bay Area or in Boston. Putting a research institute in Grand Rapids in the mid-90s was considered stupid. And I think I have understood that this actually triggered Jay Van Andel even more to say, we're going to put it here, because he wanted to show them they were wrong. And I think they were wrong. It is possible to put a research institute in a place where at the time there was nothing else related to biomedical research. And it is possible to grow to success. So this is what it looked like 100 years ago as you look up Michigan Street. You can see the blue markings there indicate where the Institute stands today. And I think the only building you recognize is the Emmanuel Church, the Lutheran Church, the tower just to the right of that blue box. This is today. So it has changed dramatically in the 100 years that have passed. Oh, well, that's not a surprise. But what is interesting, if you look at an aerial picture, is with the Van Andel Institute in the middle, the number of medical institutions, be it providing care, providing training, education, or actually doing research, that surround the Van Andel Institute on the Medical Mile, that is astounding. In such a short time, we have Spectrum Health, Helen DeVos Children's Hospital, we have Ferry State University, we have GVSU, we have the Secchia building of the MSU College of Human Medicine. Just outside of view here to the left in the picture is the new MSU Grand Rapids Research Center, and then to the right, of course, St. Mary's Mercy Health. An amazing conglomerate or mix of people interested in healthcare and research in the biomedical sciences. And that, you could argue, was started by Jay Van Andel deciding that this was where the building was going to be. And a beautiful building it is. The architect Rafael Vignoli from Uruguay designed this building, which is supposed to, maybe not everybody knows this, look like the rapids on the Grand River, the rapids that we're going to hear about later, we all know are going to be restored. And it's an absolutely stellar building to work in. When you look from the other direction, this is what it looked like in the 60s. And I want to thank Bart Williams, who's a professor at our institute, for trying to take exactly the same view today. And this is what it looks like today. And you can see there's just buildings everywhere. You don't see much. So the growth has been tremendous. Total investment in infrastructure, in healthcare and health education and research in the order of $3 billion, and that might even be an underestimate. So it's a lot of money that's gone into these buildings. So it is 20 years ago this year that the formal grand opening happened. And I know we're going to discuss, who made all of this happen, who made Grand Rapids flourish again, where are we, and who's going to take over the baton as we move forward. And you can see with Gerald Ford, Jay Van Andel, Peter Cook, Ralph Hauenstein, several people who are no longer with us, were absolutely essential for this to happen, for the whole start of the medical mile 20 years ago. And today our director, Peter Jones, has said, we seek out and bring together the best minds from around the world to collaborate on development of treatments and cures. We offer the leadership, support, and resources, including that building, that accelerate the work that they do. So we are very fortunate that we have now the critical mass with that whole medical mile and with the people we've recruited in the building to really attract research superstars. We have around 440 employees at present time. It is still growing. There are about 38 research groups, and those groups have 285 researchers. So about 140 people are actually support operations staff who make the building and all the operations work. So in the big picture of things, we're not a huge employer, but the fact that the Institute exists, I think it's fair to say, has spurred so many positive developments in the medical area, in that medical mile, that it goes well beyond these numbers. The Institute is also involved in research education, and we have 34 students currently who are preparing to do a PhD. It's a 4 to 6 year endeavor. We had over 90 applicants this year for this program. We have an intake of about 10 to 16 students per year. And it's become quite popular. So we're on the global map. We're getting students from all over the world applying to come here. You probably know that the Van Andel Institute, aside from the research, also has a Van Andel Education Institute that runs a K through 12 program to train young kids into scientific thinking and problem solving. And I think that will have an impact going forward 20, 30, 40 years from now, as those little kids become the adults who live here and work here in Grand Rapids. The last number on this slide that I want you to look at carefully is that there are 35 countries from which employees hail. So we have people literally from all over the world. And we have collaborators all over the world, which is true, I think, for any biomedical institute, but the better the research, the more collaborators you can find far away. But it is exciting that we're attracting so many people from all over the world. And later in the panel discussion, I'm going to discuss what I think we as a city can do to help attract those people who are getting offers from Stanford, Harvard, or other places, and tell them why Grand Rapids is a better place, not just to work, but also to live. Because I think that's where we have the edge on the Bay Area and in the Boston area. So here are the areas we focus on, and these are complicated things. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these, but cancer, I think everybody knows and can relate to. It's been a focal point for the Institute for 20 years. And for the past 8 years, we've also been doing research into Parkinson's disease, and more recently, we've recruited people who are focused on Alzheimer's disease and other dementia disorders. About 2 years ago, we started recruiting a cluster of 4 professors who came from Canada and from Germany who work in metabolism. So right up here, you can see 3 disease areas that truly are major diseases in society. Cancer, of course, we know it's decreasing, which is good, thanks to research and altered lifestyle, but it's a major killer. Neurodegenerative disease is on the rise, and we do not have any effective therapies that can slow or stop the diseases. And metabolic-related diseases, with the obesity tsunami in this country, huge problem, unbelievable problem. And understanding metabolism and diabetes is going to be incredibly important as we move forward. Now I want to highlight 3 other research areas that are intertwined with these 3 disease areas. So epigenetics is the study of how genes are regulated. You know, we all carry genetic material in each one of our cells, that tells us who we are. Up to a point. We inherit some from our fathers and some from our mothers. But you'll know that monozygotic twins, even though they look very similar, they're not absolutely identical. They may have the same genes, but there is epigenetic regulation of which genes are actually working at any one given time. And as we sit here and we eat our breakfast and drink our coffee, we influence our cells so they will turn on and off different genes, and this can be done through a very complicated molecular process that we summarize in the word epigenetics, on top of the genetics. We're trying to understand how epigenetics influences cancer. Peter Jones is a world leader in this area, and he joined us about 5 years ago, and we recruited a large number of world scientists, or world-leading scientists in that area. We're also interested in bone biology because many of the cancer diseases that we have affect bone when the tumor metastasizes to bone. And we also know that metabolism affects bone and aging affects bone, with osteoporosis being another major health issue in this country and in any country that has an aging population, in particular aging females. Finally, we were fortunate to purchase a $10 million microscope. It's called a cryo-electron microscope. This was made possible through the generosity of Dave Van Andel, who saw that this was an amazing opportunity where we can look at a higher magnification at the molecules that are inside cells than has ever been possible before. And we recruited immediately a handful of professors and specialists in this area who've been here now for about 3 years and been incredibly successful at teaching us how molecules change under different conditions when they are attaching to chemicals that regulate them. These might be what we call receptors. And through that knowledge, we can then have people design drugs that influence those receptors. If we know the structure, we can influence the activity. So these are the areas we work in. But let me then, just for the last 10 minutes, focus a little bit on Parkinson's disease, which is near and dear to me, and it's really what I know. It's what I've been doing since I was a kid. Today, there are about 7 to 10 million people affected. That number will rise. We know that it will rise because the population globally is aging, and it's a disease where the first symptoms appear when you are in midlife or later. We also think it will rise for other reasons that I'm going to come to in a minute. Now, most of you think of Parkinson's disease as what you've seen Michael J. Fox suffer from, which is a movement disorder with tremors and slowness of movement and the gait freezing and the stilted gait. And those are truly the classical signs of Parkinson's. It's called a movement disorder. That's the textbook chapter under which Parkinson's comes. But there are lots of non-movement related symptoms. We've only really understood this properly in the last 15 years, although the disease has been around for 203 years. So these are the loss of sense of smell, constipation, depression, anxiety, a wide range of things that can affect people not just when they have been diagnosed with Parkinson's, but actually, as I'm going to tell you in a minute, well before that. And then as the disease advances, a high portion of people with Parkinson's will also have cognitive decline. So it's a very severe disorder. And the financial impact in society is just huge. You can hear all sorts of numbers out there. It's hard to estimate, but it's usually hitting people in the middle of their productive life, and they're forced into nursing homes. So in 1817, James Parkinson in London described 6 cases that to him looked similar, and he called his description an essay on the shaking palsy. It took about 100 years before people started calling this Parkinson's disease in his honor, and it was considered a single disease, characterized by those motor changes that I described, and you only would diagnose it once they had occurred. And in 1958, actually my hometown in Sweden, Lund, a scientist called Arvid Carlsson discovered that if you give a drug called L-Dopa, you can chemically restore some of the balance that is lost in Parkinson's in the brain. And in his case, rabbits could move again. These were a model of Parkinson's. And we now know that L-Dopa can make people with Parkinson's move again, at least for a few years. He got the Nobel Prize in the year 2000 for this. But the discovery was made a long time ago, and it is still the best treatment for Parkinson's, which tells you there's lots to be done. We have no ways to prevent the disease or slow it down yet. I'm going to tell you that we hope we will have soon. We know now that it is not one disease in the sense that all the patients look exactly the same in the brain. They don't. Their clinical presentation can be very similar, but their brains will differ, and the rest of their bodies, the way they respond to this disorder, will differ. So we're probably dealing with several causes of a disease that result in this clinical picture. And the amazing thing is, it doesn't seem actually to start inside the brain. It might start in the gut. It might start in other organs that we call the visual organs, all those that are inside your body cavity. It could start in other places. It could also start in the nose. And this is quite a revelation. When I started as a medical student in 1980, nobody talked about anything but the brain in Parkinson's research. Now half the discussion is about other organs. We now also know that there is a genetic component. When I was a medical student, there wasn't a genetic component. My father had Parkinson's, but I was told, has nothing to do with you. Well, now we know that about 20 to 25% of the total risk for getting Parkinson's is genetic. But that also means that 75 to 80% is not something that we can affect and learn. We can still only affect the symptoms. We can't slow them. We can't impede progression. And we're now trying today to understand those other risk factors. So if you look at this slide, you can see that the molecular disease process begins much earlier in life, because it's time on this line, much earlier in life than when the patient comes and visits the doctor. So the first tremor is a sign of a disease that's been going on for maybe 10 or even 20 years in that patient's body. They're totally unaware of it. They may have been constipated, they may have lost their sense of smell, but maybe they have asthma, maybe they smoke, so they don't know that it's related to Parkinson's. They may have felt depressed, which 30% of the population does at one point in time. So all these non-specific flags that can be due to other things could actually be a sign that that person will develop Parkinson's disease. And we must understand this phase that we now call the prodrome. Actually, we have a conference in September here in Grand Rapids with about 300 people focusing only on the prodrome. We must understand what's going on long before the people develop the motor symptoms. We're all born with that genetic risk. We have more or less risk. That's the first point that starts this disease process. But then we have to have environmental insults, several of them, and normal aging needs to occur before the disease actually happens. So at the Institute, we're looking at epigenetics and genetics to understand that whole time course that I'm describing. We're trying to understand what parts of the brain circuitry involved. The nerves that innervate the gut seem to be involved. How are they involved? Are they actually conduits or highways for the disease to get into the brain? And we're trying to develop ways to stop this spread of the disease from the gut, from the nose to the brain, and once inside the brain, from the parts that govern movement to the parts that govern cognition, our ability to remember things, speak, plan things. Because if we could stop that, the disease burden would be less. We think inflammation is involved in this. We think that masses of clumped proteins are involved in this. And we're using drug repurposing as a strategy in our institute. We're actually funding an international program where we take existing drugs and try to repurpose them in Parkinson's disease. Because I think if this is the present, this is what the future looks like. I think in 20 years from now, Parkinson will be a label for a group of disorders, and we'll be able to define in individuals how it started, what the course is likely to be, whether you're likely just to have movement problems or cognitive decline, and we will be able to intervene. Early detection means we can change lifestyle, more exercise, better diet that might prevent it, or we can give medications. And also, I think understanding the whole process, that whole chain of events, means we can have therapies that actually stop the progression. So the tremor, the first tremor when the patient sees the doctor, may all that need to be what that patient actually experiences. Finally, I'm absolutely convinced that we'll be able to repair the brain using transplanted brain cells that come from stem cells. And you actually see in that picture, that's a mouse, but the green cells at the top that are going into the red part of the brain, they're all transplanted nerve cells. They actually make the chemical that's missing in Parkinson's. And I'm absolutely convinced we will have that as a therapy 20 years from now. In the cases where we were unable to prevent the disease or stop its progression, we can go in and repair part of what is lost. So with that, I'd like to paint a positive picture and an exciting picture, and I really hope that the Van Andel Institute will play a part of this story, and there are other stories that are occurring in cancer research in our institute, and structural biology with that fancy microscope, and in epigenetics. But this was just one illustration where, of course, I feel most familiar with this whole field. And I'm very grateful for the way the community has supported the Institute with philanthropy. We are very, very fortunate to have the support not just of the Van Andel family, but many donors here who've made this possible in such a short time to change basically a parking lot to a bustling, exciting biomedical research environment. So thank you so much.
Forecast for me is really kind of a dream. It's a culmination of a dream.
The first forecast event came to fruition out of a conversation with Grand Valley, where we wanted to showcase some data capabilities that we had built.
Our partnership began, I think it was in about 2000.
When we look back at the forecast event, I think our first one, we may have had 35 attendees.
My role with the first forecast event 20 years ago was working with Grand Valley and the research and marketing people inside what was then Grubb & Ellis.
My role with the forecast event has basically been planner, promoter, perhaps sustainer, survivor, and working behind the scenes, not in front of a camera.
Feel proud of our community and what's going on.
This will be my 8th forecast. I think my first memory was when I walked in and I was blown away at the size, the magnitude, and the professionalism, and that's kind of when I was like, you gotta step up your game here.
Duke had hair when we started.
And I lost it at the event.
Been to every event but one out of the 20.
So to see the change in it blows me away. I'm excited about it. It's been fun to be a part of. It's been fun to see it move from location to location to location, and to see the different involvement.
Over the past 20 years, it's been really fun to watch the event evolve.
We're still here, celebrating 20 years.
20 years ago, if we could have looked into a crystal ball and see where we're at today, we couldn't imagine that. Downtown has exceeded everybody's expectations in terms of its growth. The fact that now we have theater down there, we have the arena, we have 20 Mineral Live, we have amazing restaurants and bars to go to.
Where Grand Rapids really made a transition was we took all of our old real estate, and all of those have been bought up and converted most into office space.
The multifamily market over the last year has been strong. We had a little bit of softness in the rental market through the summer, which was due to some of the newer projects that were delivered and those projects absorbing. Occupancies remain strong across the board. Rental rates are starting to tick up a little bit. The positive news for landlords downtown is that there's not a lot of new construction in the pipeline. We're seeing kind of the critical mass that we've always needed downtown and reaching it. Affordable housing is a hot topic in West Michigan right now, as it really is across the country. One of the great things about West Michigan are some of the public-private partnerships and philanthropic organizations that are helping push affordable housing. ICCF is one great example of that, and ensuring that there remains housing in great areas of the city that is attainable for everybody. As long as everybody keeps playing in the sandbox, I don't see any reasons why this bull market should end anytime soon.
The 2020 retail market throughout Western Michigan is going to continue to see retailers and restaurants jockeying for space. In Holland, downtown Holland, they have a great market down there. A lot of retailers want to be there. Traverse City, it's continuing to grow, and retailers want to be there, and nationals want to be there, and there's so much great tourism in Traverse City. Lansing, Lansing with Michigan State, with their expansion, their growth around there, it's its own community right around Michigan State with retail, and then you fan out from there. We are going to see prices increase, we're going to see vacancy decrease, and we are still going to continue to see construction costs high.
The office market, we've seen significant changes primarily in the medical sector with the consolidation of medical groups and those groups moving into larger, newer facilities. Where we're getting many more restaurants and bars in downtown Holland, which is appealing to the younger crowd.
We've been found out in Grand Rapids. We're not a well-kept secret anymore. Everyone's looking at us. We've got a lot of new companies here. We're going to see a lot more in the future. We're at record low vacancies. When I started in the market, at some points, I think we saw close to 25% vacancies. Today, 7.5% vacancy. We're going to see a little downturn. It's, I don't think, going to be as bad as we saw before, just because of where we're at and how we're positioned here in West Michigan, but we will see it just a little bit.
Past year has been very good for the West Michigan office market. But I think there's been a few major changes. One is there's a lack of inventory. So with a lack of inventory, it's more difficult for tenants and companies looking to locate to find space. That we hit below 10% vacancy, first time in 30 years. That's a pretty major deal for our city. So in the past, a tenant might have entered into a 5-year lease. Now tenants are going 10, even 15-year leases so they can get those great build-outs. The biggest issue facing downtown in the market is a positive one. It's people want to live down there, people want to work down there, and young people don't want to just be in a bland, boring office space. They want cool, collaborative, great amenities. They want to have workout facilities. They want to be able to walk to lunch or to cool restaurants. The West Side is really in the beginning stages of this renovation, this rebirth. I think over the next year, we're going to see very similar to what we've seen. Nice steady growth, increasing rental rates, decreasing vacancy. We're going to see more new construction. You're going to still see cranes in the air.
The market's very strong. Prices are at all-time highs. Demand, we don't see tapering off. West Michigan was very accustomed to the $3 square foot lease rate. Well, that's sailed off into the sunset, and the new reality is $4 a foot, $6 a foot, up somewhere up to $7, depending on the product and product type. Yes, we're coming into an election year. There is some uncertainty there. We don't expect any drastic changes on the local real estate side. Manufacturing has slowed down on a national level. Locally, we have phenomenal fundamentals here. We're very well diversified from a manufacturing standpoint. But the big thing is knowing your customers, knowing what they need, and knowing the market so you can act fast. You're going to see a lot of development in the Walker View corridor, which is in the north. Quite a bit of new construction that's going on there. You have, the FedEx distribution facility that's there. It's a 400,000 square foot distribution facility. Flexco is moving off of Oak Industrial Drive, and they're building. You've got Falk Panels, which is a company out of the Netherlands that is close to moving into their new building up there as well by the airport. You've got Amazon in that 68th and Patterson, 68th and Broadmoor. There's some substantial projects happening there. And then when you look at kind of the last corridor, the southwest corridor, there's some new construction happening in Hudsonville, Jamestown Commerce Center.
We're in a great cycle right now. There's tremendous activity. We are very busy right now. We're probably as busy right now with the clients that we have from a retail standpoint as we have ever been. Instead of being overbuilt, we're under demolished, really. We need to tear down a few more buildings. We've had the Tanger Outlet come to town. Cabela's was not in West Michigan or anything like that. And that was a great addition. We have a very good population growth in West Michigan, more so than probably most of the rest of the state. And retailers want to follow that. Restaurants want to follow that. People like the owners of Woodland Mall. Fortunately for them, or for us, they are proactive. They added a brand new Von Maur department store. The Cheesecake Factory, REI, and there will be others too.
The next step for West Michigan is to figure out how we proceed and how we underwrite projects based on infrastructure needs, because that's very costly. It impacts the value of land and what you can pay for it. Use and zoning is impacting that considerably as well too. There are national and regional developers in our market looking for opportunities. So we are actively working with different people that are trying to make the math work.
So on the question of rate of growth, we've had phenomenal growth over these last 20 years. And I think some people think that maybe we're nearing a point or a maximum. And I would say we're going to see an acceleration of growth, and I would say an expansion of growth. We've become an attractive place for people to come to for a job. We have companies in this area that work with carbon fiber. We have companies that work with aircraft, aerospace, medical technologies, food manufacturing. If you look at the Holland-Zeeland market, that has experienced great growth. That distance between Holland-Zeeland and Grand Rapids is changing. When you look at the MSU College of Human Medicine relocating here, that tied together with Spectrum's work, tied together with Banana Institute's work, those things will start to integrate and I believe create even new growth and more growth areas in the future. So with the announcement of Spectrum consolidating operations for administrative and staff on the North Monroe District, that's going to impact a lot of buildings in the market. I think you're going to see the North Monroe District continue to accelerate. And then as you think about downtown, we're out of empty lots to a great degree. We're out of empty buildings to a great degree. I believe we're going to start to see buildings that are antiquated, obsolete, are going to come down, and we're going to see much larger buildings in their place. We have one key project, Site 36, that still has quite a bit of land available. I believe next year that one finally has ground broke and will be solved. What is happening at the Studio Park development is phenomenal. I can't believe how much that has changed. When ground breaks for an Acrisure headquarters and we start to see that going up, that's going to be huge. Traffic has increased. And if you look at the license plates, they're from all over now. So do I hate traffic? Yes, I'm a farm guy. I can't stand traffic. And yet, you know what? If we're going to have growth, we're going to have traffic. We just got to figure out how to plan ahead for it.
Early in 2019, we added a new advisor and a new office in Traverse City, Michigan. So that's our first endeavor up north, and it's great for us to have a presence to serve our clients there in that area. The most recent, really exciting news for us has been our new office and new advisors in Lansing. The state then, with Lansing being the last office that we've added, Basically ties in the entire state from one side to the other with an office in Southfield, Ann Arbor, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Holland, and then the office in Traverse City. We'll continue to grow, but just grow strategically, always ensuring that it's a great cultural fit for us.
Looking into the crystal ball, another 20 years out to 2040, bricks and mortar is going to change. It's going to continue to evolve with a more entertainment type of component to it.
I think we'll start to see some generational shift as well, where families and private individuals will want to divest themselves of their real estate holdings, and so we'll see other investors come into those roles.
I don't necessarily believe that within 20 years we're going to have flying cars, but I do believe our mode of transportation and our way of getting to work will be impacted. If you're looking 20 years down the road, I think that parking crisis will go away.
We're going to continue to see the growth in West Michigan for a long time to come here. We've really set ourselves up well. And the big question is going to be, where is it going to happen?
Yes, there's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some good years. There's probably going to be some difficult years in the next 20 years.
Sites that have the proximity to be accessible to the downtown core via walking or biking or mass transit, that's the sites that are going to grow, and that's really exciting to me.
The theme of 2019 has been significant growth in Colliers and West Michigan. With the addition of the offices in Traverse City and Lansing and the new professionals that we've added in Grand Rapids, we have had a tremendous year in 2019, and we're looking forward to a really strong and successful 2020. We've truly enjoyed reflecting back on the last 20 years and looking forward to the next 20 with you. Thank you for attending, and we wish you the very best in 2020.
All right, we're going to wrap up today's event with an intriguing panel of community leaders. We're going to move this forward. We'll get you out of here on time, but we have a great panel. Normally, we look back last year, where we are today, where we're going next year. We've decided this year on the 20th anniversary to take a little different step. We're going to look back 20 plus years. We're going to look at where we are today, and we're going to dream 20 years forward. We've asked the panelists to be candid, to be bold, to be thoughtful, to give their personal opinions. We don't care if they're a little controversial. We're happy to hear it. That's what we're looking for. So they're going to speak. Hopefully it's a conversation, and I'm going to move it along. I'm just thankful for all of them to spend time today to be here and to participate in this. So at this point, each panelist will introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get on to the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Kelly. I am the president and CEO with Downtown Grand Rapids Incorporated. I was born and raised in Kalamazoo, did my undergrad at Hope College, then spent some time in Boston and out in California for about 10 years. I was kind of on a Goodwill Hunting theme there for a bit. But my wife and I moved back to Michigan about 7 years ago and have been working with DGRI for that entire time, and have been thankful and appreciative of all the growth that's happened. And just want to say thanks to Colliers and Duke for always putting on a great event. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Megan Saul. I currently serve as the Deputy City Manager for the City of Wyoming. For the purposes of this morning's discussion, I am also one of the campaign co-chairs for the Grand Rapids Whitewater Project. We'd be happy to share about that. I am a West Michigan native, grew up in Allendale, a mile north of Grand Valley's campus on 48th Avenue, have since spent some time in Chicago with the City of Wyoming. I was in DC, I lived overseas for a while, but have been back in the Grand Rapids area for, I guess, 9 years now, which feels like a long time. Anyways, happy to share about a lot of things this morning, and I'm going to harken back to Duke's comment in the video and receive the fact that this is the year for Site 36. So we're just going to speak that out loud, and if we can bring that to fruition in this room, that'd be great.
I'm John Wheeler. I'm the CEO of Wheeler Development Group, and I was born about a mile from here and was raised, educated here in the west side of town. I'm a graduate architect from Ferris State University, then Ferris State College back in 1976. And I've been goofing around in the building and development business for the last 44 years. And they couldn't find somebody else, so Duke asked me to sit here.
I just love the fact that I won't be the only old, fat, white guy with the long hair that you reference moving forward, and I appreciate that, my friend. My name is Rich McKeegan. I'm with ASM Global, formerly SMG. We manage this building as well as the Van Andel Arena and DeVos Performance Hall. Been here 21 plus years now. Born in Montreal, high school in Ottawa, Ontario, university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, graduate school in Miami, Florida, worked in Miami, worked in Ottawa, then moved here in '98. It has been absolutely tremendous for my wife and I for the last 21 plus years. Figured we'd be here 2 or 3 years, and we are now 3 Grand Rapidians in with 3 teenagers and have enjoyed it thoroughly.
So I think you already know who I am. I was the guy who was here just a few minutes ago. But I come from Sweden, and I spent several years in the United Kingdom, but the last 30 years prior to coming to Grand Rapids in a small university town called Lund in the south of Sweden. That was about 3 to 4 hours away from the international airport in Copenhagen in Denmark. 20 years ago, they built a bridge, artificial island, and tunnel that joined Sweden and Denmark together. Lund is now 35 minutes away from a major international airport in Denmark, a different country. Trains leave every 15 to 20 minutes. Those 20 years, Lund has been transformed by this simple connection to a major metropolis, capital city of a country, and an airport.
All right, I think we know where some of that's going to go.
Yes, you
I
do.
love it. We got a little bit of a change in the program, and just the fact that somebody we had originally wanted to be on the panel wasn't able to attend, and last minute actually is here at the event because his event in the DC area was canceled. And I just want to have a minute here, and we might call on him in a bit. So if City Manager Mark Washington, if you could stand up, grab the mic, introduce yourself, and give a little as well introduction of yourself, if you would, please.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Washington. I'm City Manager. I've been here in Grand Rapids since October 2018. Prior to that, I spent almost 10 years as Assistant City Manager in Austin, Texas. We went through a little growth spur there in Austin. While I was there, the city transformed from about 730,000 to almost 1 million people. A lot of the common ingredients that I saw in the growth in Austin is here. The recipe is here in Grand Rapids, and I'm just glad to be part of it. I am glad I could be here. Actually, it's the U.S. Conference of Mayors that's occurring. Many of you may have seen Mayor Bliss even last night talk about the need for us to have our local ability to maintain sports tourism as part of our economic growth and have minor league teams, which Major League Baseball is looking to dissolve some of them. So that's one of the things I hope to add to the discussion later on today, to talk about the many areas of economic development beyond just real estate.
And Mark, I just want you to, if you got a topic, you want to raise your hand, they'll get my attention, we're going to pull you in. How's that? So thank you for allowing us to have this conversation. So first part we're going to do is just talk a little bit about looking back a little bit. The interesting thing is if you look at this group, a lot of them haven't been here that long. In fact, I think Megan and John are the 2 local, longtime people who have been here. And so maybe if somebody could just take a stab at what was Michigan, what was West Michigan like 20 plus years ago, and why did it develop the way it did? And just as an example, if you look at Flint, 60 years ago, similar sized cities. Today, completely different trajectories. So, John, would you maybe take a stab at just what was it like, if you look back at the landscape, you said 44 years, go back and talk about what it was like, and particularly maybe the downtown area.
Sure. So in 1980, I moved to Indianapolis and took a job with a very large development company. And they had 5 offices around the country. And back in '79, when I lost my job as an architect here in town, Jimmy Carter, president, blah, 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 prime rate was 21. There wasn't a lot of construction and architecture, so I was grateful to get a job down there. So I went to work with a very progressive company. And Indianapolis was a Unigov system where the county and the city joined to save money. It was the second one in the country. Louisville, I believe, was first. Indianapolis in 1969. So there was a seamless government agency, and when we started buying up buildings in downtown Indy was just like Grand Rapids only 10 years before. Manufacturing had left, tremendous amount of square footage in the urban core, And it was just, I let it die. The suburbs were great competitors. Carmel, Zionsville, I mean, everybody around one step outside of the city limits was doing great. Just let downtown decay, it's going to hell. Well, a little band of developers and the government got together and started this thing like, we got to give you guys some economic development. We got to help put together a story, start restoring our downtown, or we're going to lose. Now, they were a state capital, so they had the government spending, but those people at 501 were gone. They leave the state capitol and all the surrounding government agency buildings, zero retail, zero fun, it was dead. So in the 8 years I lived and worked there, things transformed tremendously. Then my dad died back here in Grand Rapids, so I made a commitment to my family to come back, and so I started at Rockford Construction in '87. And I walked downtown Grand Rapids on my visit back. I had been coming back and forth, but never focused. And our town was broke. It was dirty, dusty, and broke. I'm like, holy cow, this is deja vu 8 years ago in Indy. Only much smaller footprint. We don't have the government backing of a state capital. So I started looking around and, well, what's going to happen to this building? And so I went and talked to some people, and some of them were the Second family and DeVos family, and they let me in and said, what are you thinking? I said, well, I'm thinking we ought to buy up some of these buildings, and we ought to start putting some energy back into our urban core. And so we bought about 1.7 million square feet in about 35 different transactions. We bought everything on Monroe Center, Herpelsheimer's, Steckety's, Peck Building, blah, blah, blah. They were all dead empty. There wasn't. The only thing living in them was pigeons and a few homeless people. Then Ray Kaiser introduced me down to the Cutler family, went down just south of Fulton Street, and we bought 13 buildings down there, 100% dead empty. We bought about 1.7, 1.8 million square feet at between $10 and $20 a square foot. We started thinking, okay, how are we going to create something? We got to get some life back into this game. So I would say that it was the black and white years of Grand Rapids, Duke. From like that 1985 to 1990, it was not good. Government offices up on the north side by all the county courthouse, state courthouse, they all left at 5 o'clock. You know, the law firms parked underground. You never even saw them. They just get up, go up the ramp and leave and go back to East Grand Rapids and Cascade. And it's like, we got to try to do something here. I will say the one thing that happened was I went to see then Mayor John Logie. And we had a discussion. It's like, what are you up to? And who the hell are you? So, well, I'm an agent of change. We're going to do something here. You need to give us some money. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? There was no DDA. There was no Economic Development Board. There was nothing. There was like, so I gave him my speech on public-private press. You're the public part. You got to start throwing some money in the kitty. We got to start generating some interest, or the kids will never move back here. You'll never have housing in downtown Grand Rapids. In the meantime, the East Bank Towers was going up and things went wrong and it started coming back down. And you know, there was a lot of negative things going on. And so the story was that we had plenty of ways to improve. It was at its lowest by far.
How about Megan? What do you remember about West Michigan when you think about it, when you started into this thing?
Yeah, so John referenced 1980. I won't tell you where I was in 1980, and maybe I wasn't born yet, but that's okay. So downtown for me started, my earliest memories of downtown are coming down to the city center. I don't know if any of you remember that. And we'd ride that little tram and we'd eat Happy Meals from McDonald's, and that was my first downtown experience. My family was very suburban. Well, quite frankly, we lived in the country and didn't spend a lot of time down here. Growing up a little bit later, I remember when the arena was first being built, and there was a coffee shop where Angels now is. It was called Four Friends, and one of my English teachers in high school was one of the part owners. And my sister, if I begged her, she would let me tag along, and we would drink chai lattes, and I thought I was very cool drinking chai lattes downtown in Grand Rapids. Obviously, fast forward a little bit, since then we've seen a lot of change. As many of you know, I had the great fortune to work for The Right Place for 4 years. And really, when you think about the story of The Right Place, you think about civic mindedness and you think about philanthropy, and people in this community really banding together to say, we want something that's bigger than ourselves. We want to be a part of it. We want to make it happen. We want to fund it. And that, I think, is the story of West Michigan, and really the resurgence that we've seen in the last 20 years. As Dr. Brendan was saying with Medical Mile, it's the same story there, but it's very much about this special fabric that we have in this community that when we want to do something, we get together, we figure out who needs to be in the room. We can talk more about that later. But then also, how do we move things forward? So much like the inception of the Right Place, business leaders, community leaders coming together and saying, this is what we need. We need an economic development organization. We need to move forward. I think that's also what we've seen.
And we'll pick up everybody at different points in the conversation. But, you know, when we talk about vision, we think about who had the vision. You have to have a vision. John talks about if what was there. If you don't have a vision, what move forward? I'm going to read something from November in my biz that said, the vision MSU first laid out more than a decade ago when moving the medical school to Grand Rapids, when it wanted to position West Michigan to be the leader in transforming health. It's given everybody a real view of Grand Rapids, said Peter Secchia, who among local business leaders pushing medical mile vision for more than 20 years and gave heavily to support it. It's going to make a big difference in the city. Vision matters. Who had the vision? Who has the vision?
I'll jump in on that a little bit. I think picking up on something that John was saying, you know, around that time in the 80s was when leaders like Rich DeVos, Jay Van Andel, but even from the city side, you know, Lyman Parks, the city's first African-American mayor, and just a number of community folks, I think, got together and saw the opportunity and potential for downtown and the urban core to really revitalize the city as a whole. And so I think it was people like that that really kind of started the process, and it's been picked up along the years. John Logie, that John referenced, and people back in the early 90s have put together a Voices and Visions plan for downtown. And I think the thing that's always remarkable and that people always highlight about Grand Rapids is a collaborative nature and people working together from the private and public side to not only put a vision together, but then to act on it. I mean, what vision is one thing, but then having the ability to implement, I think, is what really sets us apart from a lot of our peer communities. And so I think, you know, you can look back over the past 20, 30, 40 years, and there's a long list, but I think some of those names that continue to come up are the ones that are important to highlight.
And Rich, you talk about some of the things. We're sitting in a building here, right, that you oversee, the arena, all of those things. We swing a pretty heavy bat for a size community. Talk about what your direction and the drive and what vision you were given and the vision you're taking on that.
I'm given the vision whatever my boss says, so that's first and foremost, to make that clear. But I tell promoters, I tell competitors, we fight well above our weight class. And that's, I'm talking about my industry, but I think I have found that to be true in other industries that I've become familiar with. And Tim, you referenced, it's one thing to have the vision, but can you act on it? I feel as a community, we're very right-sized to be able to act on it. Other places are a little bit too small, may not have the resources to fulfill those actions. Other places are a little bit too big, it gets a little too cloudy, a little too busy. We have continued to be very right-sized to be able to act on it. We still get phone calls in our office from other communities across the U.S., primarily focused around the arena, the Van Andel Arena, saying, hey, we've seen what that did for Grand Rapids. We'd like to replicate that in Community X. And my line is always, happy to have you come. I'll spend as much or as little time as you want. I'll set up meetings. But you may not be able to get it done because of that public-private collaboration that existed from the time that John started talking about, probably before that too, with the Gillettes and everyone else. But it became a scenario where this is the expectation. If you want to make a difference, if you want to participate, you got to be able to be willing to make a difference. And that became the expectation amongst the leaders of the community. I think that still is the case. But it's stories about what happened then that need to be continued to be told. A lot of people presume this crap just happens, and it doesn't. The VAI, probably 15, 20 years in the planning between an idea and then actually opening and doing something. This stuff needs to be thought about, considered, talked about, planned for, and leadership needs to develop. And I think over time, some of that is getting lost in terms of an appreciation level for the front-end work that needs to go in to make things happen.
Just FYI, Van Andel Arena, second highest grossing arena in the country for its size, seventh in the world for an arena its size. It's an extremely well-run asset that we have here. So thank you to your team for getting that done.
I appreciate that, Duke, but it really is, people like live entertainment here. And I do not want to detract from the fact that the people from West Michigan and beyond, over 50% of our ticket sales from the Ticketmaster system for concerts come from outside of Kent County. So it's the region, it's a regional asset. People like live entertainment, and it's a business. Dave Matthews Band is going to come because I think they can make more money here than Stop X. So it's a business.
Talking about that, maybe, and Patrick, we'll get to you in a second. I know you got some things you want to say, but if we look back just, and then we're going to talk about where we are today, but we look back a little bit, what are some of the activities, projects, or things you're most proud of over these last 20 plus years? And what are the ones that kind of happened that nobody thought could happen? John, you want to take a stab at that? What would you look back and say, these are some of the most integral, influential projects, changes? Could be a project, could be a theme, it could be an issue.
Well, I think obviously back in '82 when Rich and Jay did the Amway, that was huge. I mean, it was like barren land, and here sticks a 30-story hotel and renovation, world-class renovation of the Pantland. That everybody had to look back and go, A, how did they do it? And B, why did they do it? And C, if they could do it, maybe we could replicate that kind of an effort, maybe not to that scale, but certainly we can take a look and see what happens. So I think that was a huge catalyst for other entrepreneurs. I also think that when you look at our street structures in downtown Grand Rapids, mostly north, south, east, west with a little bit of Monroe Center, you know, we're a city of corners. They're very small, short blocks. So one of the things I would say that's been influential is we have done a pretty darn good job of starting to build our corners. I mean, that to me creates activity, vitality, pedestrian satisfaction, short blocks, the McKay Tower just trading hands, those kind of things. We're not these big, elongated, one-way, fast streets. So we had an opportunity to make a change in small ways in neighborhoods such as Monroe Center, where we had some verticality and some low. And I also think that realizing that the suburbs have taken all the retail out, we weren't going to go and become a big downtown retail center. So we had to rethink downtown Grand Rapids. And I think Grant Action and I think the Right Place really helped focus on, okay, well, if we can't have that, let's just admit it and let's go on to something else. So I'm not so to say that's a tangible thing that happened, it's more of an intellectual thing that happened.
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's landmines you avoid. Megan, looking back, particularly your time at the Right Place, if you look back 20 plus years, what are some crazy things we never thought would happen in the state or West Michigan that occurred? Some things. You got any? I mean, I think about right to work, right? Who'd have thought that we would be a right to work state? Yeah. Never would have thought that, right? Yeah. I'll give you another one. Who'd have thought that we would be Beer City in Dutch Reformed Grand Rapids? Yeah. Think about it, guys. We're Beer City. You know, you think about things like that. What other things are you look back and you think over these last years of projects or things that have occurred?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I'll talk about the suburban metro areas a little bit. You know, for Wyoming, we've seen tremendous growth in the south end of town. Metro Health Village, Metro Health University of Michigan Hospital. None of that development was there. Gazan Parkway didn't exist prior to 2005. And now we also have GFS headquarters out there. We have a number of manufacturers. I mean, that's pretty substantial growth that we've seen. In the same way in Kentwood, we've talked about Walkerview today. There's a lot of industrial development that's taken place on the edge of our community that has not only brought in millions of dollars of investment into our community, but also tens of thousands of jobs, really. And as we talked about the recession, right, the way that West Michigan was able to weather it in a lot of senses is because we had such strong, diverse manufacturers in the region. Certainly, they probably flashed some pictures of GM. When we found out that facility was going to be closing, it's one of those weird days where I still remember where I was when I got the phone call. I was actually at a conference in Detroit. It was like 4:10 on a Tuesday afternoon when I found out that facility was going to be closing after 73 years. Certainly, that's an opportunity we still have, and like I said, we're looking forward to moving into this year and really making some things happen, but that's, whether it's a positive or a negative, is something that happened that we wouldn't have foreseen. It was one of the highest producing facilities that they had. But as it comes with communities, change happens, and then we learn how to pivot. But also, as I think about that site, we were served for 73 years by that facility. And so looking into the future, and part of the reason I think why it's still vacant is because we're not interested in just sticking the first thing that comes there, but really figuring out what's going to take the community into the next 73 years.
One of the things we talk about is a theme, and it's been mentioned to me many times, is the excellence theme of making sure your facilities are excellent. We have, an excellent ballet, opera, symphony. We have excellent facilities. Dr. Brundon, you've talked about the facilities at VAI, and Rich. Where did the push for excellence come from? And you see it particularly, I had the unfortunate experience of spending a lot of time in Lemon Holton over the last few years. But when you walk in there and you have a valet take your vehicle and they walk you in and there's a piano playing and you got 4-story atrium, you're walking into a beautiful facility to get treatment, which is the most depressing thing, and yet you're getting your infusion looking out of a window. There's an excellence there. And where does that come from, and how do we perpetuate that?
I think there is an excellence in buildings in Grand Rapids, which is amazing. But as you walk out from Lemon Holton and drive down Michigan Street towards Van Andel, you have to navigate all these potholes. And we have lack of excellence when it comes to communication and infrastructure, where I really think for the future, the vision should be to try to think beyond our potholes. That's a no-brainer. Having proper road surfaces, I think everybody would agree, but it is a major problem. We should think 20 years into the future when we will not be driving single-driver, gasoline-fueled cars. There'll be something else, electric cars or whatever they're going to be called. They might be autonomous. And I would argue, if you want a vision, how about we pair up with the car industry in Detroit and the researchers at Ann Arbor and say, hey, we're a community. We're prepared to change our roads and our infrastructure to adapt to what the future will be. That's communication, and I think communication is key. The other thing where we are behind, and it's a simple investment, is optic fiber. The optic fiber doesn't reach very much of Grand Rapids. It reaches downtown, which I think is a stunning thing. Parts of East Grand Rapids, you can get 25 megabits per second. These are simple things that will just multiply exponentially. And finally, and we talked about this on the phone, how about if we tied together Michigan with a high-speed train, with high-speed internet on it, so you could work on it. So you can go from Grand Rapids to Lansing, Ann Arbor, Detroit Metro Airport, and downtown Detroit. This would be a place where everybody would come in both directions. Don't worry about Grand Rapids losing out. We'll have more people coming to the arena. We'll have people moving here to Grand Rapids because now they have access to an international airport, which I think is one of our major problems, that we have to fly to O'Hare and Detroit. So I would think that would be amazing. So focus on transportation, communication, and be leaders. The roads that we have to Detroit is not the future. This is not how we're going to be communicating and driving 20 years from now. So think about that. Have that vision.
So talk about, we're going to kind of go a little bit away from the real estate side and talk about where we are today. But with that, if you even look at this panel, as I mentioned, a lot of these people are new here, and City Manager Mark Washington. Maybe take just a brief second and talk about what was your perception when you got here, right? What was your impression of West Michigan? What was your perception? What is it today different from what it was? Tim, why don't you take us there, and everybody can jump in wherever, Rich especially. And
Yeah, happy to. I think, I had the benefit growing up. I came up to Grand Rapids a few times. I definitely went to the Van Andel Arena to see the Chili Peppers when they were here. And at that time, you would go to the show and you would leave, and there was not much activity around that. And so I think when I came back to Grand Rapids about 7 years ago, it was clear the amount of activity that had happened since I had been gone. And that has only accelerated in that 7-year time span. I mean, one of the first projects that I worked on when I started at DGRI was a visioning plan for the Arena South area. Shortly after that, John completed Arena Place, and now we're all seeing the benefits of that thinking and vision with Studio Park opening up. And so, it's just been an amazing amount of activity in the past 7 years, and so, hopefully more to come.
Rich, how about you?
So September of '98, I can't remember if it was the 12th or the 14th, whatever that Monday was, that was my first day of work. And the company put me up in an apartment, furnished apartment in Plaza Towers. So I came in on Saturday and figured, you know what, I'll be busting my balls for the first 6 months. I'll come in Saturday, I'm gonna find a place to get a bag of chips and a 6-pack of beer. I'll sit in my room and watch football Sunday, and then I'm hitting the ground running. Sunday morning, I could not find a place to buy chips, let alone beer. So at that point, I'm going, what the hell's going on? And as I'm walking around, I'm seeing people standing in the freaking river fishing. That freaked me out. So it was not a good mindset for me walking in Monday morning. Since then, it has been nothing but positive. And my line is, I cannot fathom a better 20 years to have been in Grand Rapids. And I honestly feel the right people and the right things are already in place. And again, we talk about planning and everything else. What little of the world I know that I'm privy to, a lot of the right people have got a number of courses being set so that the next 10 to 20 years look as positive.
I'm going to actually hit the city manager a second here. Is he, there he is. If you could maybe talk about your first impression of Grand Rapids coming from Austin and kind of what your perspective is today. And then I'm going to hit you a little bit later on your desires for the future.
Sure. When I first experienced Grand Rapids, it was in 2016, and it was not coming for an opportunity to be considered for the job. And my perception was this was a very conservative community, and that, you know, it was not known for its progressiveness, at least at that time. And the reality is that it's just the opposite. This is a very forward-thinking, really, as Rich said earlier, a progressive community that fights above its weight in many, many ways. And I want to also just comment on it earlier about excellence. And that is one of the things that did strike me. And what I noted was that certainly private sector, like in many other communities, in terms of its standards of development, was far above where government was, particularly in our infrastructure. And I think, as we said earlier, progress takes time. And so, for instance, like with the roads, it was 2014, I believe, that this community realized that we had to make a much more aggressive investment in infrastructure. And we have since tried to make sure that there's still potholes on the roads, obviously, but we want to get about 70, the future is we want by 2029, we want 70% of our streets in good or excellent condition, and we're making that progress. A few years ago, it was 31, 32%, now we're about 60, so we still have some ways to go. We also need to ensure excellence in not only visible infrastructure, but as you said, the invisible infrastructure, making sure we have 5G infrastructure in place for the Internet of Things in the future. And also, we have now autonomous vehicles driving on those potholes, not for long, downtown, but finding ways that we can increase mobility and transit in our city.
Thank you. What are our challenges today? What are the obstacles? Patrick, you talked about, I think if I were to rephrase it a little bit, is sometimes we think a little small. We think a little bit parochial and too tight. You would tell us to think a little bigger. Is that an obstacle that we have?
I don't think it's an obstacle. I think thinking bigger is an opportunity. And I think it isn't just about the train and the roads, that's one of my favorite things, but it's also about how do we attract this young workforce to Grand Rapids, and what do people want? When we came, we now have 4 kids, we didn't know that it was such a child-friendly community, and it is amazing to have young kids, and it's one of our main hiring arguments. But I would want to say that we should also promote recreation by restoring the rapid and perhaps building, as I've said also in a phone call, like a wharf area like they have in Washington, D.C., on the Grand River where people walk around and eat and can stay in hotels. That would attract a young professional generation. Our scientists are usually 25 to 30 when we want to hire them the first time. And we have to offer them that sort of thing. Skiing. You know, we have to accept we have snow. Let's use that to our advantage. We love skiing, but we need to improve the facilities nearby. Canonsburg is old, and there's room for more. So I think look at the possibilities. Don't think of the obstacles. There are lots of possibilities.
Megan, maybe you hit a little bit, and then Tim talk about you know, key projects that are in the pipeline to address some of these things that maybe will you know, maybe be the attractor.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's missing that we can talk about is sort of who are we developing for? And that's a theme that's really come very strongly through the work that the Rapids doing right now and looking at their routes and their operations, and quite certainly the Grand Rapids Whitewater project. So Whitewater, in conjunction with the City of Grand Rapids and DGRI and others, you know, they've kind of taken this theme River for All, and that's truly what we want to be. And as we move forward into the future, are we developing for just those of us in the room? Are we developing just for the people who can afford a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard? Or are we developing for every person who lives in West Michigan that might want to use the river? So certainly we have a tremendous opportunity. I co-chair the campaign committee with Mike Van Gessel and John Green. I think part of our role is just to keep talking about it to make sure people know that it's still alive. To points that were made earlier, development takes a long time. And these projects take 10, 15, 20 years to come to fruition. I think we're about 10, 12 in, so we're right on target. We have the distinct opportunity, I'll call it an opportunity, to work with 7 regulating agencies, if you want to think about that, state and federal, and so those are the processes we're working through. If all goes well, we hope to be in the river in 21 or early 22. We will start with the lower reach, which will be Fulton to Bridge Street. We'll do some things there, remove the dams, put in some boulders and rocks and natural features, and then move upstream, which is where we'll put in the adjustable hydraulic structure up near Ann Street and get the rest of that going. So certainly, I'll be candid, I was in a conversation a couple months ago where someone said, why are we spending all this money on restoring the rapids when we should be addressing things like social equity and inequality? Some bunch of people looked at me and I think I turned kind of red. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and I think as we move forward with development projects like this, if we get it right and we make sure that we are including all of the voices for whom will be benefiting from these kind of projects, that it will only help to further these other conversations about equity and inclusion and equality. So certainly no magic answers, not an easy thing to do, but it's how we're moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll underscore a couple things there. One, it's an incredibly complex project. I think more complex than anyone knew when it started out, but it also has the potential to be one of the most transformative projects that the community has ever seen. When you think about not just the recreational opportunities and amenities that will be added, but the economic development potential, the ability to create opportunities for everyone in the community, the river really is that transformative project. I think that we all are putting a lot of time and energy into it, but for good reason. And we'll start to see some activity here in the next year or two. And the community will be better for it as long as we continue to keep things top of mind related to equity and inclusion, and thinking about not just the rapids, because the rapids is going to be tremendous, but also the potential of the banks. When you think about development, when you think about parks, trails, all those things that can connect into some of these larger amenities that we talk about. I mean, the river is going to be truly amazing when it happens.
If you're not familiar with the river stuff, look it up, please, because in my opinion, it will do more for West Michigan than any other project that we've been talking about today over the last 30 years. I think the impact it's going to have on this community in terms of yet another point of delineation amongst our competitive set, regardless of the industry you're in. Talking about some of the development, you can build a lot of stuff. You can't build a river. We have the river. Be familiar with it, especially from a real estate perspective. Those touch points are going to spill over 2, 3, 5 blocks on either side of the banks from where it starts to where it ends. It's going to be a tremendous opportunity for all of us, for this community. And I am very hopeful that it moves forward in the direction that I think it will, and commend the folks involved because it's a big freaking deal.
That goes back to the vision and somebody having a vision. I think all of us, I know John has talked about the river in his past talks, how important it is to get this river going. I remember coming back, this is quite a few years ago, from an event. The city was in the, we were all in the doldrums. The economy was in the doldrums. And a guy named Rick DeVos was going to talk about this new thing. And I was thinking it was a new company or a project or a building or something exciting coming downtown. And I get done and he's talking about some art event. I came back to the office. I was so depressed. I thought, what the heck is that going to do for this community? What in the world? And then the very first day of Art Prize, I should have walked from our office to the restaurant because to take a car took too long. It was packed. That was the very first day. I remember being in Chicago at a restaurant that year, and my wife and I are sitting in a little restaurant, and I heard this two couples talking, and my wife's mad because I'm not paying attention. I said, shh, listen. And the women had just come back from Art Prize, and they were dragging their husbands back to Grand Rapids the following weekend for Art Prize. Culture in Grand Rapids? I laughed. I thought it was the funniest thing. I never gave Art Prize any credence. Art Prize changed the way we market our town. It changes it dramatically.
I want to add to that in a much smaller way. So when we were about to move here some 10 years ago, I knew very little about Grand Rapids. I knew they had some young Swedish hockey players and injured Red Wings Swedish hockey players came and played here. That was about it. And I was scouring the internet to find out about Grand Rapids. And then sadly, I came across this Newsweek article that said Grand Rapids was a dying city. Do you remember?
Oh, yes, I have that.
But as a result of seeing that article, I saw the response, and it was a video, American Pie, and I think the mayor was in it, and and I thought, wow, this is an interesting place. And I watched that video 20 times thinking, I'll go there for an interview. This is an interesting place. They're not just responding lying down. They're saying, hey, this isn't true, and we're moving up. So that 4-minute video made a difference for us. So sometimes, culture is very, very important.
We talked about some of the key projects that have occurred and recently and are coming online. We talked about Restore the Rapids. We talked about Studio Park. What an amazing project that is. We talk about hopefully getting our first corporate headquarters downtown coming up. John, you just announced something exciting that you're exploring this week. Talk about that real quick, and then maybe Rich and Tim talk about how that impacts your efforts.
Well, you're talking about 22 Fulton?
I don't know. It's big.
Yeah, or 22 Ottawa, excuse me. It's big. So mixed use, we got to stop putting things in little containers. Well, that's an office building. Oh, and that's a retail building. Oh, that's an apartment building. When we started in this game, there was no building code that allowed us to do mixed use in the city of Grand Rapids. We literally had to go back and rewrite the master plan and the building codes back in the mid to late 80s, early 90s. And everybody bought into it. They're like, but who's going to ever do one of those things? And, the country was full of them, but we had to bring ideas here. So the mixed-use projects such as Arena Place, where we have, 440,000 feet retail, restaurants, 100 apartments, 150,000 feet of office. So I want to step back 1 second. So the empty buildings go away. They're all full. That inventory, that opportunity is full. So what do you go after next? You go after flat surface parking lots. They're like the hockey player that's missing a tooth. Like, you got all these nice buildings, and there's a parking lot. Wait a second. I hope Mike Ellis isn't here. No, he's not here. I made sure I called him yesterday. So you go after the parking lots. There's your next opportunity to do something of mixed-use adventures. Things like the Warner Tower and the Hyatt Place Hotel and Venue Tower. And when we did that 20 Monroe Live, those were all city parking lots or private parking lots. So as we look around, there's still opportunity there. So the city said, we don't want this parking lot. It's actually not even a parking lot, maybe 12 cars or something. So they did an RFP. So we're going to do a 24-story mixed-use development there. Residential, office, retail, restaurant, parking. And it'll be not quite as much square footage as the Warner and the Arena Place, but it's going to start to create the opportunity to see that we can go vertical in this town and not be afraid of it. And, that's the vision that we're trying to do. I don't have my eye off that post office yet. I've been on that for 25 years. That is a heck of a site. Pretty soon when Amazon buys the post office, puts them out of business, we'll go buy that. But we're going to continue to work on sites like that, where we, you know, just like the river project, you got to be patient. We've had an awful lot of meetings, things happen here and there, some great developments. But what we got to try to do is we got to attract and retain this next generation that will take our places when we decide not to do this anymore. And what's that going to take? It's going to take an emotional connection that they want to live there, they want to play there, and they want to call it home. And that's our job as a developer, is to make sure that we hit all those points. So with City Tower, that's what we've dubbed the new project, City Tower. It'll be one more little bit of a project that says, yeah, I live in City Tower. Boy, we go downstairs in the elevator and we got this great restaurant that they got out of Chicago. We got this. And we walk around town. We go to 20 Monroe Live. We walk across the street to the Van Adel. That's what's going to attract these people. We have tough competition. When we interview for our executives in our company, they're coming from all over the country. Denver's a tough one. Austin, to Mark's city where he came. I mean, these are tough competitors. We've got to try to package to the size and scale that we can to make Grand Rapids right on the edge of, to be considered as one of the final three where these people will come and live and play and raise their children.
Tim,
We've got other things that are, I'm sorry.
One
last thing I would say that's an intangible, but it's clear from my days with running around with Chief Dolan, Harry Dolan. The safety and security of the people that decide to live down here is critical. And the Grand Rapids Police Department and how they have interplayed, I'm on the Boys and Girls Club, Kids and Cops programs, all these, that's where its grassroots starts. That's where we have to do. We have to make sure that everyone understands this is a safe and secure environment. Fire, police, transportation, that we're looked after, there's a net. I think our homeless population, and I think the people that have instability in their lives down mostly headquartered in the south region of Division, there's a net. We have tremendous amount of support for the Mel Trotters, the dwelling places and all that. We all give there. You all get letters every day in the mail, write a check, and that's a good thing. But we sit on those boards and we watch and we try to work to make that population be served by so many of you out there that do everything that you can through your church organizations and your nonprofits. I think that is an underlying asset that this community has that a lot of them don't. So there's a place to park your charitable time and efforts and energy. There's certainly a place that we're creating for the fun stuff that Rich manages, all these arenas in the 20 Monroe, all these things like that. And there's a place of security and stability, and that's what we rely on when we undertake a $50 or $60 million apartment project. Is we can't sell it if it's not safe. So that's an intangible that I think this town really has strong. Everybody cares about that.
Anybody got to add to it? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. I got one final little topic. Anybody want to touch on that project? And
I guess from our perspective, I would just add, I think it's hugely important for the reasons John mentioned. I think going vertical, seeing a new 20-plus story building added to the skyline's really important. And then also from just the residential population perspective, you know, we have a goal that we're working toward around 10,000 households in downtown. We're about halfway there. And so we want to continue to see people living downtown because I think it helps, you know, activate places like the arena, but it also helps support small businesses, restaurants, things like that. So to see John's project and hopefully some more along the way with some of the other development opportunities in downtown, that's what we're looking for.
we're going to wrap up with one final question. I'm going to ask everybody to be kind of brief. I'm actually going to start with Manager Washington. If maybe you could stand up and just, if you could wave a magic wand, what would be one major action, event, theme, or activity that you would like to see accomplished over the next 10 to 20 years that could dramatically propel West Michigan? What would that be from your perspective and your seat?
I think it would be master planning for our entire city. And so we've done a lot of things for downtown with the GO4 plan. There's some area-specific plans that we've recently done, Southtown, South Division, some other areas starting to see growth on the west side. But I think that's only about, we've only master planned recently our plan for about 30% or so of our community. And so my goal in the next 3 years is to develop a comprehensive master plan for our entire community that's inclusive of growth in all of our neighborhoods. And hopefully that will be our vision for the next 20 years.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe you're a person who believes we need some vertical towers downtown.
Absolutely. I mean, density is the key, and because we're landlocked, we only have 43 square miles for land use, and so we're going to have to become more efficient in our land use and be dense.
Thank you. What activity, theme, next 20 years, wave a magic wand, what would you like to see occur that you'd be really fired up about the progress we've made as a city? Patrick, what would you say?
How about we get another major biomedical research organization? How about one of the major universities, U of M or some of the others, say, we also want to come to Grand Rapids? That would be quite amazing. We're so happy and satisfied. MSU's here, got the Van Andel Institute. But how about setting the bar even higher?
Who'd have thought that we would get MSU to move their College of Human Medicine out of Lansing to Grand Rapids? Who would have ever thought that? So, crazy idea? Not so crazy.
Well, we offer U of M that they can experiment on our transportation as part of the deal, so then it'll get there.
All right.
I was afraid he's going to say experiment on our arena managers, but I guess from a selfish perspective, my board that owns this building, the arena and DeVos Performance Hall, are looking at a potential downtown outdoor concert venue and amphitheater, as well as a potential major full-service convention hotel. I think either of those two things, but holy crap, if both of them happen, I know it would keep my piece of my world and what I feel we do for the region going at a very, very upward clip. And I guess more community-minded, diversity. It goes to retention and everything else. I've always said I got two problems with Grand Rapids. The winters are too gray and the org charts are too white. And that's something that I think needs to get continued to be improved upon. It has definitely gotten better in the last 20 years since I've been here, but it's nowhere near where it should be. And I think if you're looking at both retention as well as bringing new people in, they're used to diverse communities. It's the norm, and it is strikingly not that way here in many people's eyes.
About the only place you get to see it is if you actually get a chance to walk through the Van Andel Institute, and there's a walkway that goes through there where the researchers walk through. It is the United Nations walking through there, isn't it? It's pretty amazing. John?
A professional sports team, no question about it. We will never get into the tier 1 cities without, and I think we got to go over there and talk to Mrs. Firestone, rename it the Michigan Lions and build a stadium right over there. And if that doesn't work, get the NFL, and the third time in my life, to expand the teams again.
Do Major League Soccer. The bar's very low in Major League Soccer. As a European, I can recruit a bunch of Swedes that can play in the team. No problem.
So my goal would be to try to find a sports commission group that would go after the NFL and get it from 32 to 36 teams and get ourselves a professional team. And that just, when you go to an NFL town, they are completely different. And I think, to me, that would really be the coup de grace of the entertainment section. We'll fill in all the other sectors, but we're really dying in the entertainment section when it comes to professional sports.
I'm going to be greedy and do 3 quick ones. So Site 36, 28 West, but also the big one for me, the redevelopment of Division Avenue from Grand Rapids clear down to 60th. We have put so much time and effort and infrastructure into that corridor, and we know it can do good things, but how do we get there? And I'd love to see that.
Someone in the video said in 20 years the parking problem will be solved, so I'm glad I don't have to add that to my list.
You got lucky. I was going to throw that one in there. We took it off the list because of time, but that was going to be your issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit on a lot of the big ideas, definitely the river for me, but also one of the initiatives we're going to be kicking off this year is a reimagination of the dash areas 7, 8, and 9 parking lots to think about what that area of the west side might look like in the next 5, 10 years. So that's an exciting project that I think has the ability to potentially transform the west side of downtown in the future.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to read a little quote here. This was from an article that was done comparing Grand Rapids to Flint based on some old research. Part of it was done by Michael DeWild, director of the Cousy Ethic Initiative at Seidman College of Business, so it's got a good tie in here. But he talked about why Grand Rapids became what it is. And one of the comments he said was he jokingly suggested there's another lesson other cities could learn from Grand Rapids' experience. And I thought this was really interesting. He said, Have 6 or 7 billionaires who live in your city who are civically and philanthropically inclined, and hang on to them for all they're worth. I would actually add to that and say, hang on to their kids for all they're worth, because we have been blessed by those families. They have led the way, and we didn't talk a lot about them today, but we have been blessed by people who care about our community. All of you care about the community. I'm so grateful for the panel for joining us today out of their busy schedule. They're going to stick around a bit. If you have questions for them individually, personally, please come up and talk to them. Thank you all for coming. Sorry to keep you so long. We hope this event was encouraging. We hope it was insightful. We hope it was thought-provoking. We're grateful to be a part of this community with you. If you have any questions, follow-up ideas, comments, complaints, and bitches, there's the email address. Send it to them or talk to any Colliers member. And I just, again, thank you for making this event what it is. Safe travels. We'll see you next year.